Another influence, of course, on cognition, the study of cognition, neuroscience. Now, that's what chapter 2 is dedicated to in your book, but I won't steal too much thunder. But brain functions are more observable these days than ever with the recent advent of positron emission tomography, a PET. Now, that's not particularly recent. And functional magnetic resonance imaging. fMRI dates to, 94, maybe 30 years old, and PET probably the late 60s. But there's a big difference between those two things. fMRI is much more specific and does not involve the participant having to absorb an injection into their bloodstream of a radioactive agent. On the other hand, the magnet in an fMRI machine is very dangerous. So a person has to be screened for any metal that they might have in their person. But these things have shown with great specificity brain areas that are responsible for certain aspects of mental life, and has made, as Watson would have preferred, mental processes observable. It's just absolutely astonishing. And of course, we'll get into some detail in that in chapter 2. Now, also, over the course of decades, we've become more refined about localization of function. For example, thanks to the work of Brenda Milner of McGill University, still with us at 105. She was born in July of 1918. And others, we know that the specialization of lobes and that the frontal lobe, fix that right now, is paramount to restraint and planning. Now, you might remember there's an incident, a case study that happened in 1849. Phineas Gage, probably heard of this story. Railroad employee was involved in an explosion in which a metal device was very heavy. It was about a yard long, penetrated his skull after the explosion, and essentially removed his entire frontal lobe. He survived. He lost no bodily functions. He was able to walk, everything. However, his behavior became very poor, and he engaged in criminality of various sorts, impulses. This was the earliest suggestion of where our personal restraint lies and where our planning lies. So this 25-year-old railroad foreman, a very good job in 1849, became pretty quickly unemployable and a bit of a criminal. And that was the first suggestion. Of course, more recently, we've got a lot of suggestion of localization of function, such as texture and sensitivity in the parietal lobe, vision in the occipital, and hearing and other sorts of judgments in the temporal lobe. But looking forward to getting into that more detail in chapter 2. It's one of my favorite subjects. But I hope you can Google sometime Brenda Milner. She was the earliest proponent of the relevance of the frontal lobe, dating back to the late 40s. So she is an absolute pantheon in psychology, and only recently has she become inactive, but she lives there near McGill in Canada. Now, often you'll see metaphors that are related to a computer in cognitive psychology. For example, computers take in information and they process them and spit something out, like on an Excel spreadsheet. This is the Atkinson and Shiffrin memory model from 1968, but it's stood the test of time for 56 years. And basically, one suggestion is you have an environmental input, like we might type something into a computer. The computer has some RAM, if you will, random access memory, and it processes it and puts it into memory and may house it in a long-term memory, etc. Now, we'll get into this in detail, but after the cognitive revolution in the 50s, if you will, we became increasingly tolerant of metaphors like this that had to do with computers. And in some cases, it appeared to be that our brains functioned similar to that of a computer. Do I want to end there? Let's see. Yes, let me pause it there. Sorry, I got ahead of myself.